My manager called me to a meeting with HR. The summons had appeared in my calendar that morning, a 30-minute block ominously titled Personnel Discussion. I knew what was coming before I even entered the small conference room. Lorraine, after 15 years with Techage, we're restructuring your position, Vanessa Palmer announced, her voice carrying a barely concealed note of satisfaction. She sat across from me, perfectly poised in her designer suit, flanked by Felicity from HR. Both women wore carefully crafted expressions of corporate regret that didn't quite reach their eyes. I noticed Vanessa's slight smirk as she delivered the news she'd probably been rehearsing for days. The company is moving in a new direction, Felicity added, sliding a manila folder across the polished conference table with manicured fingers. Your contributions have been valuable, but we're consolidating the research division under the product development team. The rehearsed corporate speak hung in the air between us. I nodded thoughtfully, accepting the folder without opening it. My fingers traced the edge briefly, feeling the weight of what was inside. The standard severance package. 2 weeks for every year of service, a decent sum after 15 years, continued health coverage for 3 months, and a list of career counseling resources I would never use. My MIT doctorate and 20-plus years of experience didn't need their suggested introduction to coding workshops. I completely understand, I replied, my voice steady despite the knot tightening in my stomach. These decisions are never easy. Relief flashed across their faces. They'd clearly expected tears, protests, or anger. The stereotypical emotional response from a 55-year-old woman being pushed out of the tech industry, where youth was prized above experience, and innovation was supposedly tied to birth year. What they didn't know was that I had anticipated this moment for weeks, ever since a misdirected email thread had appeared in my inbox last month. Bradford's message to Vanessa had been crystal clear. Time to execute our transition plan for Winters. We need younger talent leading that division. I'd read those words while sitting at my kitchen table, my morning coffee growing cold beside me as I stared at my screen in stunned silence. 20 years of loyalty reduced to a transition plan. We'd like you to clean out your desk by Friday, Vanessa continued, gaining confidence from my apparent acceptance. She smoothed her sleek bob with one hand, a habitual gesture when she felt she was winning. We need your keycard, company laptop, and phone before you leave. Your team will be notified this afternoon. My team. 6 brilliant engineers I had personally recruited and mentored over the years. Young Dominic, who'd come to us as an intern and now led our most complex projects. The same team that had helped me develop the distributed processing algorithm that now powered Techage's flagship product, AccountSphere, accounting software used by over 40% of Fortune 500 companies. The product that had quadrupled our market value in 3 years. Of course, I said, rising from my chair, smoothing the wrinkles from my pencil skirt. Is there anything else you need from me? I asked, my doctorate ring catching the light as I gathered my notebook. They exchanged glances, clearly thrown by my composure. Vanessa recovered first, her eyes narrowing slightly. That's all for now. Thank you for making this professional, Lorraine. As I walked back to my office, heels clicking rhythmically on the polished floor, I passed the glass-walled conference room where the executive team was meeting. Through the transparent barrier, I could see CEO Bradford Mitchell gesturing animatedly at a PowerPoint presentation titled Q3 Revenue Projections. The same Bradford Mitchell who had taken credit for my algorithm at last year's industry conference, referring to me only as one of our research team members, while accepting the Innovation Excellence Award for my work. I closed my office door quietly and sank into my chair, allowing myself just one moment of genuine emotion, a deep, shaky breath as I looked at the family photo on my desk. My late husband smiling beside me at our daughter's college graduation. I wondered what he would have advised me to do now. I pulled out my personal phone, sending a single text message. It's happening. Friday is my last day. The response came immediately. Perfect timing. Contracts are ready. Dinner tonight to finalize details. I smiled as I looked at the calendar on my desk, noticing my daughter had drawn a tiny heart in the corner during her last visit. Today was Wednesday. Friday, I would leave Techage for the last time. And Monday. Monday would truly be fascinating. That evening, I met Wesley Hudson at Meridian, an upscale restaurant far from Techage's headquarters. The soft lighting and ambient noise provided the perfect cover for our conversation. As the CEO of Precision Systems, Techage's largest competitor, Wesley understood the value of discretion. He'd reserved a private dining alcove in the back, shielded from curious eyes by elegant Japanese screens. Wesley stood to greet me, his warm handshake and concerned expression a welcome change from the cold dismissal I'd received hours earlier. "You look like you've had quite a day," he said as we settled into our seats. The waiter poured us each a glass of wine without being asked. Wesley was clearly a regular here. "They actually did it," Wesley said after we ordered, shaking his head in disbelief. His silver hair caught the candlelight as he leaned forward. "I suspected they might, but to cut the very person who developed their core technology. Bradford always was short-sighted, but this is beyond foolish." "Bradford never understood what I actually created," I replied, sipping my wine and feeling some of the day's tension begin to ease. "He saw the implementation, the user interface, the marketing potential, the parts he could brag about on CNBC. But the underlying architecture," I gestured vaguely. "That was just tech stuff to him. Women's work, essentially." I set down my glass, my wedding ring catching the light. "You know what my daughter said when I told her about the potential layoff last month?" She said, "Mom, they'll never let you go. They'd crash without your algorithms." Such faith. I smiled sadly. I didn't have the heart to tell her that in tech, innovation and credit rarely flow to the same person. The irony was almost too perfect. 3 months ago, I discovered the patent application for my distributed processing algorithm had never been filed by Techage's legal team, an oversight they'd claimed when I inquired, avoiding eye contact in that way people do when they're lying. They'd assured me they'd handle it immediately, but something about their response had seemed off, prompting me to check the company's internal documentation. That's when I found it, a strategy memo outlining plans to claim the algorithm as company-developed technology without specific inventor attribution. The document had Bradford's digital signature and Vanessa's comments throughout. They planned to push me out before securing the patent, knowing intellectual property developed by employees typically belonged to the company. When I found that memo, I told Wesley, my voice quieter now, I felt physically ill. 15 years of dedication, of missing my daughter's swim meets to meet deadlines, of solving problems no one else could solve. And this was my reward. What Techage didn't know was that I'd already been working on refinements to the algorithm on my own time, using my personal equipment in my home office. Those improvements, which dramatically increased processing efficiency by 43%, weren't covered by my employment agreement. I'd quietly filed for a patent under my own name last month, fully documented with timestamps and development logs that clearly showed the work was completed outside of company time. The patent had been granted with remarkable speed, thanks to Wesley's introduction to a top-tier IP attorney. "All the paperwork is finalized," Wesley said now, sliding a leather folder across the table. His eyes held a mixture of professional satisfaction and personal concern. "As soon as you sign, Precision Systems officially acquires exclusive licensing rights to your patent. The press release goes out Monday morning, announcing you as our new Chief Innovation Officer." I opened the folder slowly, the weight of the moment not lost on me. This wasn't just a job offer. It was vindication. I reviewed the documents carefully, though I'd already memorized the key terms. A seven-figure signing bonus, substantial equity in precision systems, and ongoing royalties from all products using my algorithm. The numbers made my head spin momentarily, more money than I'd ever imagined earning, especially at this stage in my career, when most companies were pushing people my age toward retirement. What do you think Bradford's face will look like when he realizes what's happened? Wesley asked, unable to hide his satisfaction at the prospect. The corners of his eyes crinkled with undisguised amusement. I set the contract down, tracing my fingers over the embossed company logo. I'm more concerned about my team, I admitted, thinking of Dominic's brilliant mind and unwavering loyalty. They don't deserve to be caught in the fallout. Some of them have families, mortgages. Dominic just got engaged. Wesley nodded, his expression softening. Already addressed. We have positions for all six of them, if they're interested. Senior roles, with significant raises. He leaned forward, his voice dropping slightly. Lorraine, I know this isn't just business for you. These people are like family. I felt a rush of gratitude warm my chest. They are, I said simply. These were the engineers who had stayed late with me, ordered midnight pizza during crunch times, celebrated each breakthrough with genuine excitement. They had become more than colleagues over the years. I signed the final page and closed the folder in one elegant move, my hands surprisingly steady despite the magnitude of what I was doing. I had secured my future, protected my team, and set my work free from those who didn't value it or me. To new beginnings, Wesley said, raising his glass, the amber liquid catching the candlelight. And to owning your own value, I added, clinking my glass against his. The crystal made a clear, resonant sound that seemed to hang in the air, a perfect note to mark this turning point in my life. Thursday and Friday passed in a blur of exit interviews, knowledge transfer meetings, and saying goodbye to colleagues. I maintained my professional composure throughout, even as rumors spread across the company like wildfire. Administrative assistants gave me sympathetic glances in the hallways, some even squeezed my arm gently as I passed. Junior developers approached awkwardly, fidgeting with their lanyards and asking if I'd provide LinkedIn recommendations before I left. Of course I will, I assured a particularly nervous young programmer. Your work on the East Coast server migration was exceptional. The relief on his face was palpable. In my office, I documented everything meticulously. Every project, every password, every process. My fingers flew across the keyboard, creating the most comprehensive transition documentation I'd ever produced. I knew full well that Techage would soon discover just how much they needed me. My decision to leave such thorough transition notes wasn't kindness. It was evidence. Evidence that I had acted in good faith, while the company had not. The contrast would be striking when lawyers eventually compared our actions. I called my daughter Thursday night, my voice surprisingly steady as I told her about my new position. "Mom, that's incredible!" she exclaimed, her excitement vibrating through the phone. "I knew you'd land on your feet. You always do. This time it's different," I told her. This time, I'm not just landing on my feet, I'm standing tall. During my final exit interview on Friday afternoon, Felicity from HR went through the standard checklist with mechanical efficiency, her eyes rarely leaving her tablet as she tapped through the corporate exit protocol. You understand that any intellectual property developed during your employment remains the property of Techage, she stated, pushing a non-disclosure agreement across the table with perfectly manicured nails. Of course, I replied pleasantly, my voice warm and cooperative. Anything developed within the scope of my employment, using company resources, during company time. I emphasized those qualifiers slightly, watching her closely. but Felicity was too busy checking boxes to notice the significance of my careful wording. "And you affirm you have no copies of proprietary company information?" She looked up briefly, her expression bored. "I have taken nothing that belongs to Techage," I confirmed truthfully, maintaining comfortable eye contact. The patent was mine, after all. The improved algorithm was my creation, developed on my own equipment, on my own time. I documented every minute of it. As I packed the personal items from my desk, family photos, a collection of conference badges marking 15 years of industry events, the coffee mug my team had given me last Christmas, with Code Queen emblazoned on it, Vanessa stopped by, leaning against my door frame with artificial casualness. Her designer suit was immaculate as always, but there was something tight around her eyes. "I just wanted to check that everything's clear for your departure," she said, watching me place items into a cardboard box, her gaze lingering on the awards and recognitions I was carefully wrapping. "Crystal clear," I replied, wrapping a small glass award I'd received for the very algorithm now at the center of my plans. The irony wasn't lost on me as I carefully placed it between layers of tissue paper. The inscription read, "For outstanding technical innovation." Innovation they were now dismissing along with me. "You know, Lorraine, these restructuring decisions are never personal," Vanessa continued, her voice adopting that particular corporate tone that actually meant the opposite. "Bradford feels the company needs to move in a more youthful direction." I looked up, meeting her gaze directly, allowing myself to really see her for perhaps the first time. The insecurity behind her ambition, the fear that someday she too would be considered obsolete. "I understand completely. Business is business." Something in my tone made her pause for a brief moment. Uncertainty flickered across her carefully composed face, but she quickly dismissed it with a slight shake of her head. What could a soon-to-be unemployed 55-year-old woman possibly do? The dismissal was so clear in her expression that she might as well have said it aloud. "Will you be taking some time off?" she asked, an artificial note of concern in her voice as she fidgeted with her bracelet. "Maybe visit your daughter?" I understand she's in Seattle now. The fact that she knew where my daughter lived, information I'd never shared with her, confirmed my suspicions about how thoroughly they'd investigated me before making their decision. "Actually, I already have something lined up," I replied, carefully packing the last photo, my late husband and me, at our daughter's college graduation. "I start Monday." Surprise crossed her features, her perfect eyebrows rising slightly. "That's fast. Anything interesting?" I smiled, allowing myself this small moment of satisfaction. "Very. A leadership position. I'm quite excited about it." I closed the box and sealed it with tape, the sharp, tearing sound cutting through the awkward silence. She nodded absently, already mentally moving on to other matters. "Well, good luck with that." As I walked out of Techage's glass headquarters for the final time, key cards surrendered and personal belongings in tow, I took a moment to look back at the building where I'd spent 15 years of my career. The afternoon sun reflected off the windows, making the structure gleam like a monument to innovation that often went uncredited. On the top floor, I could see the executive conference room lit up for an evening meeting, silhouettes moving behind the glass. They were likely discussing how to redistribute my responsibilities among younger, less experienced, and significantly less expensive staff. Little did they know that in less than 72 hours, that same room would be hosting an emergency crisis meeting instead. The thought sent a small shiver of anticipation down my spine. Monday morning dawned bright and clear, the Boston skyline crisp against the blue October sky. I stood at my bedroom window for a moment, taking in the view and the significance of this day. The past weekend had been surreal, alternating between moments of anxiety and exhilaration as I prepared for what was to come. I dressed carefully in my new charcoal suit with subtle pinstripes, a power outfit I'd purchased specifically for this day. The silk blouse underneath was a deep, confident red. My daughter had helped me choose it during a video call, insisting that my first day deserved something special. "You look amazing, Mom," she'd said. "Like a CEO. Chief Innovation Officer," I'd corrected her with a smile. The Precision Systems town car arrived precisely at 7:30 a.m. The driver professional and courteous as he held the door for me. The leather seats were soft and comfortable for the drive to their headquarters in Cambridge, where I'd start my first day with a title I'd earned decades ago but never been granted: Chief Innovation Officer. The press release went live at 7 o'clock, Wesley informed me, as I settled into my new corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Charles River. The space was 3 times the size of my former office, with sleek modern furniture and state-of-the-art equipment. Industry newsletters are already picking it up. I've got the communications team monitoring reactions. The tech blogs are going wild. He handed me a tablet displaying the official announcement, which had been crafted with strategic precision. Precision Systems acquires exclusive rights to revolutionary processing algorithm, welcomes creator Dr. Lorraine Winters as Chief Innovation Officer. The release detailed my background, emphasized my role as the sole inventor of the patented technology, and outlined how Precision Systems would be integrating the algorithm into their next generation of products. Most importantly, it clearly stated that any company currently using the technology, including Techage, would need to negotiate licensing agreements with Precision Systems moving forward. "It's perfect," I said, feeling a flutter of nervous excitement in my stomach. There was no going back now. At precisely 9:15 a.m., my phone lit up with the first text from my former team at Techage. "Complete chaos here. What did you do?" It was from Dominic, my lead developer. I smiled, picturing his expressive face as he sent the message, probably hidden in a bathroom stall to avoid being seen texting me. I typed back quickly, "Check your personal email. All 6 of you have offers waiting." Then I added, "You deserve better than what's coming there." Meanwhile, 8 miles away at Techage headquarters, the scheduled Monday morning executive meeting was undergoing a dramatic transformation. According to Dominic's play-by-play updates throughout the morning, Bradford had arrived at the office to find the company's general counsel and chief financial officer waiting at his door, both ashen-faced. The industry announcement had hit their inboxes simultaneously, setting off immediate alarms. By 9:30 a.m., what should have been a routine start-of-week meeting had morphed into an emergency crisis session. Board members were calling in remotely. The legal team was frantically reviewing my employment contract and the documentation around the algorithm's development. "They're pulling every file with your name on it," Dominic reported, his texts coming in rapid succession. "Someone just wheeled in all the servers from the research division for the tech team to analyze. Vanessa looks like she's going to be sick. She keeps saying there must be some mistake." I could picture the scene perfectly. Bradford pacing the conference room, his face flushed with anger, demanding explanations from Vanessa and the legal department. The stock would already be responding to the news. Investors hated uncertainty, and our announcement had created plenty of it. I imagined Bradford's signature confidence crumbling as he realized what had happened and who had outsmarted him. I could picture the scene perfectly. Bradford pacing the conference room in his expensive Italian shoes, tie loosened, demanding explanations from Vanessa and the legal department. His face would be that particular shade of red it turned when things weren't going his way. The stock would already be responding to the news. Investors despised uncertainty, and our announcement had created an abundance of it. At 10:45 a.m., I received an email from Bradford himself, the desperation practically emanating from my screen. Lorraine, there appears to be a misunderstanding regarding our intellectual property. Please call me at your earliest convenience to discuss this urgent matter. I studied it for a moment, noting the absence of his usual confident tone, before forwarding it to Precision Systems' legal team without responding. My daughter had taught me that sometimes the most powerful response is silence. By noon, the industry was buzzing with speculation. The tech news sites had picked up the story, with headlines ranging from Techage blindsided by patent bombshell to Precision Systems scores major algorithm coup. Techage's stock had dropped 7% since the market opened, while Precision Systems had seen a 12% increase. 3 different technology journals had requested interviews with me about the strategic coup that had shaken the accounting software industry. "How are you feeling?" Wesley asked, stopping by my office as I arranged family photos on my new desk. He leaned against the doorframe, genuine concern mixing with professional satisfaction in his expression. "Validated," I replied honestly, smoothing my hand over the polished surface of my new desk. 15 years of watching others take credit for my work, of being told I should be grateful just to have a seat at the table. I paused, the emotion catching in my throat unexpectedly. And now finally, recognition. Not just for me, but for what I created. I straightened a photo of my late husband, wishing he could see this moment. My new executive assistant appeared at the door, a poised young woman who had greeted me with respect from the moment I arrived. "Dr. Winters, the development team is ready for you in the main conference room." She hesitated, adjusting her glasses. Techage's CEO has called 4 times in the last hour. His assistant says it's extremely urgent. "Please let him know I'm in meetings all day," I replied calmly, gathering my tablet and notes. "I'll have our legal team reach out to discuss licensing options later this week." The words felt powerful on my tongue, me, directing legal teams to handle my former boss. As I walked toward my first meeting as Chief Innovation Officer, my phone buzzed with another update from Dominic. "Board just called emergency session. Bradford looks like he's about to explode. His face is purple. P.S. My team, and I accept your offer. When can we start? We're all submitting resignations today." I smiled at the message, typing back quickly, "Monday. We'll have everything ready." By Tuesday morning, the full impact of my departure had become crystal clear to everyone at Techage. Their flagship product, AccountSphere, relied entirely on my algorithm to process the massive datasets that gave it an edge over competitors. Without licensing rights to my patent, they faced 2 equally unpalatable options: negotiate with Precision Systems at our terms, or rebuild their core technology from scratch, a process that would take years and millions in development costs. "Bradford has called an all-hands meeting for 2 p.m., Dominic texted. It was his last day at Techage. He and the rest of my former team would be starting at Precision Systems the following Monday. Rumor is they're going to try to sue you. Legal has been in Bradford's office since 7 a.m. I forwarded his message to our legal department, who responded almost immediately. "Let them try. Your documentation is impeccable. Development logs, timestamps, personal equipment usage, all clearly established. We've prepared for this scenario. Consider it handled, Dr. Winters." Meanwhile, I was settling into my new role with remarkable ease. The respect I received at Precision Systems was a stark contrast to my final years at Techage. When I spoke in meetings, people actually listened, their faces attentive and engaged. My ideas weren't repackaged by male colleagues and presented as their own minutes later. My age and experience were viewed as assets rather than liabilities, something to be valued rather than hidden away. "The engineering team is implementing your efficiency improvements," Wesley informed me during our afternoon briefing, sliding a performance report across the desk. Early testing shows a 51% performance boost, even better than we projected. The team is impressed, to say the least. I glanced at the figures, a small smile playing at my lips. I had several refinements I never shared with Techage, I admitted, thinking of the late nights at my home office. The weekends spent coding while everyone else enjoyed their free time. After I discovered they were planning to eliminate my position, I saw no reason to give them my best work. It felt wrong to hold back, but self-preservation won out. Their loss, our gain, Wesley replied with a satisfied smile, leaning back in his chair. Speaking of which, the first licensing inquiry came in this morning. Not from Techage yet. They're still in denial, but from data flow systems. They're worried about being caught in the crossfire. He tapped his tablet. Their CEO called me personally. Said they don't want any part of Bradford's mess. At 3:30 p.m., Dominic sent a detailed account of Bradford's all-hands meeting. The CEO had tried to project confidence, assuring the staff that Techage would vigorously defend our proprietary technology, but the anxiety in the room had been palpable. Several employees had already updated their LinkedIn profiles, sensing the company's vulnerability. Vanessa looked like she was about to faint when some junior dev asked directly if they'd failed to secure the patent, Dominic reported. Her face went white, and she started shuffling papers frantically. Bradford cut the question period short after that. Just walked off stage. People are updating resumes at their desks, not even trying to hide it anymore. By Wednesday, the industry fallout had intensified dramatically. 2 major clients had contacted Precision Systems about switching from AccountSphere, concerned about Techage's ability to maintain the product without the algorithm's creator. Our stock had risen another 8%, while Techage's continued its steady decline. I received a call from Felicity HR, the same woman who had slid my severance package across the table just days earlier. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. Darwinters, she began, her voice carefully professional but lacking its previous condescension. I'm calling to discuss the situation with your patent. We believe there may have been a misunderstanding about ownership rights. I smiled to myself, remembering how she'd barely looked at me during my exit interview. I don't think there's any misunderstanding, I replied calmly, looking out at the Boston skyline from my office window. My employment agreement clearly states that intellectual property developed on my own time, using my own resources, remains mine. The patent documentation confirms exactly that. I kept my tone light, factual, the voice of someone who knows they hold all the cards. Bradford was hoping you might consider coming in to discuss options. Her voice had a pleading quality now, so different from her dismissive tone just days ago. Any discussions would need to go through Precision Systems' legal department now, I responded, turning away from the window. I'm sure they'd be happy to set up a meeting to discuss licensing terms. I ran my fingers over the embossed business cards in their leather holder. Here. Lorraine Winters, Chief Innovation Officer. The silence on the other end spoke volumes. Finally, Felicity sighed, a sound heavy with resignation. I'll pass that along. That afternoon, I led my first formal presentation to Precision Systems' Board of Directors, outlining our technology roadmap with my algorithm at its center. As I stood confidently at the head of the polished conference table, not hidden in the back, as I had been at Techage, I felt a sense of belonging I hadn't experienced in years. My voice was strong, my points clear and compelling. As I concluded my presentation, I caught Wesley's approving nod from across the room, and something warm unfurled in my chest. Pride, I realized. Not arrogance, but the simple, powerful pride of being valued for one's true worth. By Friday, just 1 week after I had walked out of Techage's glass doors for the last time, the company had entered full crisis mode. Their stock had fallen 23% from Monday's opening bell, triggering concerned calls from major investors and a flood of worried emails from clients. Industry analysts were publishing speculative pieces with titles like "Can Techage Survive the Algorithm Crisis?" and "How One Strategic Blunder May Cost a Tech Giant Everything." Through my industry contacts, I learned that Bradford had finally acknowledged the severity of the situation to the board in an emergency session that lasted until midnight. Techage would need to either license my algorithm from Precision Systems, likely at exorbitant rates that would devastate their profit margins, or undertake a complete rebuild of AccountSphere without using any technology covered by my patent. Either way, their market position was severely compromised. I sat at my desk, reading the latest industry analysis on my tablet when my phone rang. It was my daughter. "Mom, have you seen the Wall Street Journal?" she asked excitedly. "You're mentioned in their tech section. They're calling it the algorithm that shook the industry. And you're the star." I smiled, a warmth spreading through me that had nothing to do with business victories. "No, I haven't seen it yet." "I'm so proud of you," she said, her voice suddenly serious. "Dad would be too. He always said you were the smartest person he'd ever met." My eyes misted unexpectedly at the mention of my late husband. "Thank you, sweetheart," I said softly. "That means more than any headline." "They've started interviewing for a new development team," Dominic informed me during our Friday video call, his face filling my screen from his apartment where boxes were already packed for his move closer to our new office. "Bradford's claiming they can recreate the functionality in 6 months." I couldn't help but laugh, the sound bubbling up from somewhere deep inside me. 6 months. The original algorithm took me 3 years to perfect, and that was with intimate knowledge of the problem space and multiple iterations of testing. I shook my head, remembering the countless late nights, the failed approaches, the gradual refinements. "It's like saying you can recreate the Mona Lisa in a weekend art class." "Exactly," Dominic agreed, adjusting his glasses. "Nobody is believing the timeline, especially after your team posted their resignation letters simultaneously. The knowledge drain is massive. Half the development floor is empty already. People are jumping ship like it's the Titanic." His expression turned more serious. "Some junior developers who weren't on our team are getting pulled into emergency meetings. I feel bad for them. They have no idea what they're getting into." That afternoon, Techage's attorneys finally reached out to Precision Systems to open a dialogue about potential licensing arrangements. The email arrived with an urgent flag, though the tone attempted to maintain corporate dignity. Our legal team, following the strategy we had developed over dinner the previous week, responded with terms that were technically fair but strategically painful. 3 times the standard industry licensing rate, plus a public acknowledgement of my role as the technology's inventor. "They'll balk at the acknowledgement more than the cost," Wesley predicted as we reviewed the response in his office, sunlight streaming through the windows. "Bradford's ego won't allow him to admit he pushed out the person who created their core technology. He'd rather burn millions in development costs than publicly admit his mistake." "Then they'll have to rebuild," I replied, feeling surprisingly calm about the prospect. "And every day they spend trying to replicate my work is another day we extend our lead in the market." I traced the edge of my MIT class ring, a habit when I was thinking deeply. Their clients won't wait forever for a solution that may never come. The following Monday morning, 10 days after my unceremonious dismissal, I led the first meeting with my newly assembled innovation team in Precision Systems' main conference room. Dominic and the other 5 engineers from Techage sat around the table, their faces bright with anticipation rather than the resignation I'd grown accustomed to seeing. Large whiteboards covered the walls, ready for our ideas. Sunlight poured through the windows, symbolic of the new beginning we were all sharing. "Thank you all for coming," I began, looking at each face in turn. "I know changing companies isn't an easy decision, especially with such short notice. I'm grateful you trusted me enough to make this leap. Are you kidding? Dominic replied with a grin. Best career move ever. Plus, we get to keep working on our baby. The others nodded in agreement. The energy in the room was electric as we mapped out the next evolution of my algorithm, markers squeaking against whiteboards, ideas flowing freely without the constraints we'd grown accustomed to at Techage. This is how development meetings should be, commented Emily, one of my former team members, pushing her dark hair behind her ear as she stood back to admire our work. At Techage, we spent half our time explaining basic concepts to executives who wouldn't listen anyway, and the other half defending why things couldn't be done overnight. That's the difference between being valued and being seen as replaceable, I replied, scanning the complex diagrams and notes that now covered the whiteboards. Here, your expertise is recognized and your ideas matter. I meant every word. These brilliant minds had followed me because they believed in my leadership, and I wouldn't let them down. As we wrapped up the productive session, my new assistant appeared at the door, tablet in hand. Dr. Winters, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's been a significant development with Techage that you should know about immediately. She paused, glancing at the room full of former Techage employees. Their board just announced an emergency leadership change. Bradford Mitchell is stepping down as CEO, effective immediately. A stunned silence fell over the room, followed by a ripple of murmurs and exchanged glances. I felt a complex mixture of emotions, satisfaction, yes, but also a strange sense of sympathy for anyone facing such a public downfall. The news spread quickly through the industry. Within hours, technology publications were reporting that Techage's board had lost confidence in Bradford's leadership following the patent oversight that threatened the company's flagship product. The articles didn't mince words. Historic blunder cost CEO his position. One headline read. Another stated simply, how to lose a tech company in 10 days. Vanessa Palmer was also out, along with the head of legal who had failed to properly secure the patent. That evening, as I sat in my home office reviewing our meeting notes, I received an unexpected email from Richard Donovan, Techage's newly appointed interim CEO. Unlike Bradford's desperate message from the previous week, this one was straightforward and respectful. Dr. Winters, congratulations on your new position at Precision Systems. I've been brought in to help Techage navigate the current situation. After a thorough review of the circumstances, I'd like to discuss a fair licensing arrangement for your patented technology. We're prepared to acknowledge your contributions publicly and make appropriate amends for the oversights of previous management. The board is committed to righting this wrong. Would you be available to meet next week? Regards, Richard Donovan, Interim CEO, Techage. I read it twice, noting the difference in tone from Bradford's panicked outreach. This was the message of someone assessing damage and finding a path forward with dignity. I forwarded the email to Wesley, adding a simple note. Phase 1 complete. His reply came quickly, beautifully executed. The board is celebrating your first major victory for Precision Systems. Just left the chairman's office. They're ecstatic. Looks like Techage is finally learning an expensive lesson about valuing innovation and innovators. 3 months after my departure from Techage, I sat on the stage at the National Technology Innovation Conference, preparing to deliver the keynote address. My daughter sat in the front row, having flown in from Seattle specifically for this moment. The audience was filled with industry leaders, technology journalists, and aspiring developers, many of whom now knew my story. The conference hall was significantly larger than I'd anticipated, with at least 500 people seated in neat rows, their faces turned expectantly toward the stage. I smoothed my blue silk blouse, taking a deep breath to calm the flutter of nerves in my stomach. And now I'm pleased to introduce our keynote speaker, the conference organizer announced, her voice warm with genuine respect. Dr. Lorraine Winters, Chief Innovation Officer at Precision Systems, and creator of the distributed processing algorithm that has revolutionized data handling across multiple industries. The applause was substantial as I approached the podium, a few people even rising to their feet. My daughter beamed at me from the front row, giving me a subtle thumbs up. What a difference a few months could make. Last year, I had attended the same conference as part of the Techage delegation, seated in the back, while Bradford gave a presentation about his company's innovations. "Thank you," I began, surveying the attentive faces before me. "Today I want to talk about innovation, ownership, and the importance of properly valuing intellectual contributions, regardless of where they come from or who they come from." The microphone carried my voice clearly across the hall, stronger than I expected. My presentation detailed the technical aspects of my algorithm, but also touched on the broader issues of recognition and respect in the technology sector. Without directly mentioning Techage, I emphasized the importance of companies protecting their innovators rather than seeing them as replaceable resources. The creator's name belongs on their creation, I concluded, not because of ego, but because accountability and recognition drive further innovation. When we acknowledge the minds behind the technology, we inspire the next generation to build upon that foundation. Afterward, during the reception, several young women engineers approached me, their eyes bright with admiration and questions. My daughter stood nearby, clearly proud as she watched me engage with these rising talents. One of them, barely 30, with bright red hair and determined eyes, confided, "Your story changed how I document my work. I started keeping detailed logs of my development process, on personal time. My team lead thinks I'm paranoid, but..." She shrugged. "Smart," I replied, squeezing her arm gently. "Your innovations deserve protection, and you deserve credit for what you create." I saw my younger self in her, talented, dedicated, and potentially vulnerable to the same treatment I'd experienced. As the evening concluded, I checked my phone to find an industry news alert. Techage had finally announced the licensing agreement with Precision Systems, acknowledging me by name as the algorithm's creator. Their stock had stabilized, though at a significantly lower valuation than before my departure. 1 year to the day after being told to clean out my desk, I sat in my spacious office at Precision Systems, reviewing the quarterly innovation report. The corner office offered panoramic views of the Boston skyline, the Charles River glinting in the afternoon sun. Under my leadership, the company had released 3 groundbreaking products built on my algorithm, capturing significant market share from Techage and other competitors. A knock at my door interrupted my analysis. It was Wesley, holding a bottle of champagne and 2 glasses, his smile wide and genuine. "Happy anniversary," he said, setting the glasses on my desk with a soft clink. "The board asked me to share the news with you personally before the public announcement tomorrow morning. Precision Systems has officially surpassed Techage in market valuation for the first time in company history." I smiled, running my fingers over the quarterly report one more time. The numbers told a story of tremendous growth. Our client base had expanded by 62% in just 12 months. I felt not triumph, but a quiet satisfaction. That's what happens when you value innovation properly. As Wesley poured the champagne, my assistant delivered a sleek envelope. Inside was an invitation to speak at the Women in Technology's annual Leadership Summit. The topic, "Owning Your Intellectual Value: How Proper Documentation Changed an Industry." "You've become something of an icon, you know," Wesley commented, noticing the invitation as he handed me a glass. The story about the executive who didn't recognize what she had until it was gone has become a cautionary tale in corporate boardrooms across the country. I heard it referenced at the investors' conference last month. Richard Donovan, who had remained as Techage's CEO after the crisis, had implemented sweeping changes in how the company recognized and rewarded innovation. Their new policies on intellectual property protection and inventor recognition were reportedly modeled after the program I had established at Precision Systems, giving creators proper credit and compensation for their work. It was never about revenge, I said, raising my glass in a toast, thinking of my late husband who had always believed in me more than I believed in myself. It was about recognition, about showing the industry that innovation isn't anonymous. It comes from real people, people with names and faces and families, who deserve real credit for their contributions. To proper recognition, Wesley agreed, clinking his glass against mine, the sound clear and bright in the afternoon quiet. As the sun streamed through my office windows, painting golden rectangles across the floor, I reflected on my journey. At 56, I had finally found what had eluded me throughout my career. Not just success, but acknowledgement. My name was now permanently attached to the algorithm that had changed an industry. My daughter had called last night, excited about applying to MIT's computer science program. Inspired, she said, by watching her mother finally receive her due. I touched the framed photo on my desk. My husband, smiling at our daughter's graduation, his arm around my shoulders. "We did it," I whispered to his memory. My name was exactly where it belonged.